Hello and welcome. This is the Holographic Podcast. I'm your host, Tone D, and I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Kyle, the salty dog. Thanks for being here, Kyle.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I'm pleased to be here.
How are you doing this fine evening?
Everything is okay around here. Days are getting short. It's a little cold. There's some snow on the ground, but me and the Ted Meister were snugs as bugs and rugs. It's not too bad. I'm sitting in the comfortableness of my study.
You heard it here, folks.
And
Snugs as bugs and rugs.
yeah, I don't know.
You said it.
I
All
know.
right. Okay, that was a long-winded answer, Kyle, but we appreciate it as always. That's why we have you on the show. You know it. So let's get started. Today's show, we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to start out with something out there, but relating to every single person, which is the soul and the nature of the soul, and how the soul relates to us as humans, but also, excuse me, but also how it relates to animals and how it relates to plants. So let's jump into it. Last week we started out with defining art. So I think that worked well. This week we're going to start by defining the soul. So let's define the soul, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, and then we're going to jump right into it and see where we can go with the soul. So I found a couple definitions actually. The Oxford English Dictionary has a slightly different definition than Merriam-Webster, and I want to read them both. So the definition of the soul, according to Oxford English, is the spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or animal regarded as immortal. Did you catch that, Kyle? So according to
Yeah.
Oxford English, spiritual, immaterial part of a human being or animal regarded as immortal. Now, Merriam-Webster defines the soul as the spiritual principle embodied in human beings, all rational and spiritual beings, or the universe. So that's pretty broad. So Merriam-Webster kind of broadens it up a little bit. And I think that religious people have a slightly different definition of the soul relating to religion. So when you relate it to the universe, I really do think, in my opinion, I do think it's about energy. And that's, I think, where Merriam-Webster, that definition comes in. It talks about the universe. It talks about all rational or spiritual beings. Now, notice it says rational in there. The Oxford English does say spiritual with human beings or animals. So there's a little bit of leeway there, but I think that, oh, look at that. Kyle's got the American Heritage Dictionary. What's that say, Kyle?
It's right in there, but there are some subtleties. So the two that are sort of most akin to what we're sort of thinking about in terms of soul, one, the animating and vital principle in human beings credited with the faculties of thought, action, and emotion, and often conceived as an immaterial entity.
I saw that one too. That one's pretty specific, actually.
I kind of like it,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And then two, the spiritual nature of human beings regarded as immortal, separable from the body at death, and susceptible to happiness or misery in a future state.
That's an interesting one. So that's pretty good. That's pretty specific about consciousness almost. You know, it talks about emotion and thinking about different times. I mean, that's consciousness basically. So these definitions all vary, but they kind of go back and forth between more specific consciousness and more broader things of beings of all creation. And so again, I personally think that the soul is in there. Those definitions are close. I think it does have a lot to do with energy. So again, if you're religious spiritual and you think that has to do with a god, that's your choice. For me personally, I think it's more of an energy of the universe. I think that the energy that embodies all living things can be defined as a soul. I'm just not sure. I wouldn't say 100%. What do you think personally, Kyle?
Well, it's hard, obviously. I'm sure that people
Yeah,
grapple with this all the time.
yeah,
And even one's opinion about it can change. Probably not necessarily from day to day, but certainly throughout phases in their life, potentially, or it could remain static. But the one thing that I would put forward is that seemingly there's very little externality to the concept of the soul or a soul. It seems to be, no matter what the iteration, at least in when we refer to it as the soul of a living body, it sort of seems to be an internal thing, or at least tethered, connected. It's really sort of connected to the living body, and it rests within the living body. That was
right.
something that I kind of saw as mostly across the board. I'm sure there are exceptions. I did dabble a little bit on Wikipedia. Unfortunately, I didn't take notes. There was quite a long thing because, let's face it, a huge part of trying to define soul is tied into religion. But the other thing that I would add is that the way we use and define the word soul has tremendous variance. And that almost gives me a clue as to how different and subjective really the idea, the concept, the feeling of it is. We call music soulful. We
Right.
call our chosen life mate potentially a soul mate. Our spiritual selves is what we would call our soul. Or you can feel it deep in your soul. So it's like, again, it sort of seems to be a very internal thing. It's a subjective thing. For me, myself, I definitely tie it to energy, like you do. And I don't, through my own personal beliefs, I would say that I don't think that souls are immortal. That's just not something that I feel in my soul.
Well,
Uh,
but let me ask you this, based on what you just said. So you said that you feel like it has to do with energy, but you don't also, at the same time, you don't feel that it's immortal. So energy, energy in the universe is constant.
I know.
It's a physics concept that there's a certain amount of energy that is constant in our observable universe, and so so if that's the case, how does it not immortal if energy? Because when we die, the energy goes somewhere.
I gotcha. So let me
You're
clarify.
like, yeah.
You're
Okay.
100% right. You found a loophole in not my logic, but the way I presented it. What I was going to say is that I don't see it as being immortal in terms of the conscious soul.
Right.
So in other words, like if soul is consciousness, and I think that it's not a blanket description, but I think that those two things are not unrelated. You know what I mean? Our conscious self. I mean, even the definition, the animating and vital principle in human beings credited with the faculties of thought, action, and emotion. That's consciousness, thought, action, and emotion. It's how you go about things. That is what I meant by, I have no doubt that the energy gets recycled, renewed, pushed out into other forms, but it's that consciousness, the
Right.
idea of an individual soul with a psyche, a personality, a modus operandi, an agenda, a belief system, whatever you want to say. That is the part that I don't see as being recyclable. I
And
think that it gets parceled out. Like you say, the energy
yep.
moves out into different places.
And that's a valid point, and that's actually a somewhat of a, I would argue, a mainstream point. A lot of people think that, and a lot of a lot of
I don't mean mainstream.
I sure did, buddy, because I think a lot of philosophies and a lot of people are along the same lines as you, where when they consider this type of thing, they don't think that this consciousness travels from vessel to vessel. They understand that energy is constant, but they don't think that the consciousness moves. Now, I would argue, because I'm typically in my thought, I'm a little outside of the mainstream. I'm a little wacky, so I would argue that it's possible. And again, I'm saying it's possible because this is a discussion. This isn't us saying, oh, we know everything. So I'm saying it's possible that that consciousness is a little bit broader than what we think. And so that's the issue with the definitions that I have, is the definitions, when they deal with consciousness, when they deal with spirituality, when they deal with us as humans, that consciousness can be, it's hard to put this in the words. Consciousness can be more than just our thoughts. And so I know that's a difficult concept to deal with. So in my opinion, consciousness is...
Give us an opinion, an example.
Oh, I'm going to give an example later, but I don't want to play all my cards right now. So consciousness
Play one card, man.
I'm just saying that we as individual, we've talked about the show, how you just said it, about subjectivity and subjectivity of consciousness. So everything is subjective in our heads. And I would just argue that there could be something more universal, that there could be certain things that aren't subjective. So the energy that is in the universe may not be subjective. It may be an objective amount of energy that moves through everything. And that objective energy may carry a consciousness that's not easily, a consciousness that's not necessarily human. And some people would say, oh, you're talking about God, but I'm not talking about God, because I don't think that it's some sort of omnipotent being that's controlling. I'm talking more about a life force that moves through things, that is conscious in a way that we don't necessarily understand. So it's like for plants. So we're going to talk about plants and animals. So plants don't necessarily seem conscious, but maybe plants as a larger group as a larger entity could be conscious. So let's talk about that. So that's a good leeway. So let's get into it. So first, let's talk about animals. One of the definitions even mentions animals, and I would think most people would agree that animals do have a soul. But certain animals, they may be conscious, but do they have consciousness? Do they have individual thoughts? Do bugs have individual thoughts? So my question... idiots. So my question to you, Kyle, is do animals have a soul? And if so, should they then, this is something that I was thinking about, should they then have more rights? Should animals have more rights as soulful beings?
I mean, so I'm just going to skip the first question for a minute and say animals should have more rights no matter what. Just period. Soul, not soul, doesn't matter. Animals should have more rights. Now I'll go back. Do animals have a soul? Yes, I do. I think they do. And I think they have a consciousness as well. It's not something that really works in the same way as ours does. Obviously, that's one of the things that separates us as a species. But there are strange examples of small bridges between us and the animal kingdom. Coco, the gorilla, she did and knew a lot. And she had some animals, her and other types of animals, they carry what I would consider or call or label empathic characteristics. And I think that nothing shows soul more than empathy. You know what I mean? And I'm taking a positive spin on things because I guess, in sort of the classic duality, you could say, well, by that logic, nothing also shows soul as pure malice. You know what I mean? Pure evil. And I think that there's reasonable something to be said there as well. But yeah, I mean, animals, they do exhibit actions and behaviors that lend themselves to classic definitions of soulful behavior. And I think that, most of the time animals are just very concerned with survival, and that takes up most of their energy. But, in many, many instances, you can see behaviors in them that is not necessarily survival based. And usually it's when we do experiments with them, preferably with them, not on them, you know, and or we take the animal out of its wild environment. But even in the wild environment, you see animals at play, you see animals rearing their young in ways that seem very, for lack of a better word, human. And those all give me clues to the idea that animals certainly do have souls. And like I said, absolutely 100%. Should we give animals more rights? Yes. I mean, we've talked about it briefly before. I mean, I'm weak and I haven't been able to do it, but vegetarianism is really kind of right on when you talk about,
So
these things that
so
I
that
think we're stepping on them badly.
yeah, that brings me to my next point. And so I mostly tend to agree with you. I think you're absolutely right about a lot of things. And so with vegetarianism, it's going to be a learning process, I think, for humans as we go forward, because so I know a few complete vegans, and I used to try and be somewhat vegan, but I do eat some animal products now. I knew some vegans that they didn't, wouldn't eat any eggs, and they wouldn't even eat any honey because it was a product of bees. Now, I think that may be taking it too far. I think for the future of humanity, I think that we do need to uh, learn to live with animals and use certain products because it's going to help our society. And I think that I think there's a lot of learning that our society has to do. Yes, we have to eat less animal products, but at the same time, there are certain things like that, I think, that aren't necessarily realistic. So yeah, we should be eating less animal products, but can we use the eggs? Yeah, eggs are really, really useful in all cooking, and it's not killing the chicken. Honey is very useful, but it's not killing the bee. So there are certain things I think that we can do to use animal products and still allow animals to have their rights. But that it's going to be a big process, because right now, so much of society all over the world, not just American societies in every country, take animals for granted and really
Mhm.
treat them poorly. So it's
Mhm.
like it's such a giant. Do you know how many chickens are on this planet right now? I think I was reading the last number I read. It was something like 50 billion. So there's like 7 billion people, but there's 50 billion chickens. And that's because they're factory farm. That's
I
because
know.
so many people around the world eat chickens.
I know.
So there's 50 billion chickens on this planet. I mean, that's a giant step we're going to have to take to treat chickens better. Like
Well,
that's
I mean, why stop there? Let's continue on to the rest of the fowl family. I mean, today, 2 days before Thanksgiving,
right,
American Thanksgiving, think about all the turkeys that have just been raised for this one freaking thing, this one day.
right.
It really is sort of tragic. At the same time, I wanted to ask you, though, because this is something that I grapple with all the time. Okay, so we're both in agreement that animals have souls. We're both in agreement that the way that we consume animals right now needs lots and lots of work. If not, we might end up, if we were to talk about this for days and weeks and whatever, we might come to the conclusion that we shouldn't consume them at all. But bearing in mind that I'm going to continue to consume them, I often grapple with the idea of, can you give an animal, can you get the best of both worlds? Can you give an animal a happy life and get away from some sort of like sin or black mark on your soul by murdering the animal to eat it, if other things are worked out in such a way, such as decent treatment, a full life? Is there a way to kind of like to have both scenarios exist?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. It's a valid question, and I think that is the future of our relationship with animals. And I would say yes, because I think the way that the world works, I think the way that life works on this planet, as humans, we are going to die. It's hard, another show we can talk about death. We can talk about our mortal souls. But so all animals and plants also are mortal. Like, I don't know, there's supposedly this one crustacean that keeps making a shell, and they call it like the immortal the immortal lobster. I can't remember if it's a lobster or not, but it's like an immortal crustacean because it keeps going and going. But eventually, you know, it doesn't live forever. It has a really long lifespan. So everything is mortal. So in that mortality, I think as humans, sometimes we put so much negativity on our mortality, but really in the scope of the universe, and you know, I think of the scope of the universe, in the scope of the universe, more death and mortality is just a part of the natural cycle. It's a part of nature. It's a part of our energy flowing to other things. So I absolutely think that there's a circle of life and a way to be conscious and help plants and animals and your fellow humans, you know, have rights and be existing, but also realize that then we're going to reach the end of that life. So if you're on a farm and you've raised some animals and you've given them good lives, but then eventually you slaughter them, I mean, that's kind of the way that things are. And I think with indigenous peoples, you know, a lot of indigenous peoples will go and they'll slaughter an animal for meat, but they won't go and kill everything in the forest. They kill that one animal and they're thankful for it. So that circle of life, I think, is ultimately who we are as humans. Like, we're omnivores. We obviously, you know, we have canine teeth. We're obviously meant to ingest some sort of animal product, even though I think ultimately we did evolve eating mostly non-animal products. Some people might argue against that, and that's again a different show. I have a lot of evidence that shows the opposite. We evolved to eat mostly non-animal products, but we are omnivores, so we do eat some animal products. So that circle of life is something that is a part of. It just seems like right now it's twisted. So we can get back to that natural cycle, but right now it's twisted where we have 50 billion chickens. That's not a normal.
And 50 billion chickens not living their best lives.
No. Right. So that's not a normal, that's not a healthy relationship with animals.
That hurts my soul. even though I'm about to consume a chicken tomorrow. Although I will say this, that chicken was locally raised and it was supposedly happy before it.
So yeah, so I mean, I think we can agree that that, you know, we can agree that there's that the extreme isn't the right way either. Saying extremely vegan where you completely don't touch animal products, that's obviously not how the circle of life is. And if individuals want to do that, fine, but you have to realize that with so many people on the planet, that's not realistic. It's just not realistic for every person to be vegan, but it is realistic, I think, for us to eat less animal products.
Absolutely. This is my Bernie. So, and I know that we're getting ready to segue, and this is a question that we can use to segue, but it just reminded me what our discussion was leaning in this direction. I think we're getting ready to talk about plants, which is another interesting thing. But one of the questions I had was why do we devalue the souls of innocent creatures, be they human or animal or plant? Why does it seem like, and there's millions of people out there that don't do this, you know what I mean? But regardless of those millions or potentially even billions of people that don't do that, the systems, at least here in this country, that have come about, they are soul devaluing systems. They don't pay enough attention to the intrinsic, empathic, spiritual, you know, thinking part of our personalities, and also the innocent bits and pieces that sort of like make up what I would consider the soul of animals. Like, we don't really think about it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, here's the animal, time to slaughter so that we can survive and eat. But there's very, very little thought given to, you know, why don't we put more of a value on these lives and the souls that are part of these lives? You know, that's always a question that I've had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I actually don't have the answer, and I don't want to get into it because that's kind of like, well, that's kind of like, why are humans psychopathic? And that's a different show. Why are there psychopaths? Because I think there is a big disparity between a lot of humans. We've seen that some humans can be extremely psychopathic, some humans can be extremely compassionate, and then a lot of humans are kind of right in the middle. Why is there that giant disparity? Why is that with our species?
Because we still, and I know this is a different show, but I think, and this is good, this is a teaser, I think it's because we're still very much animalistic. So
Right.
we're bridging this weird gap between we'd like to become enlightened and we have all these really lofty ideas and the stuff that we talk about, you and me, and yet we are fucking base creatures. And
Right.
really what we want to do is fucking kill each other and fucking, you know, hit each other and have sex and all this crazy and eat and you know, it's just like there's these base instincts, and it's like you have to balance it out. And some people can't balance it out, so they kill people.
I mean, that's a good point. It's an interesting point, and
I can't wait to talk about that.
That's a big show. So, but right now we're talking about plants and animals.
It's a huge dark show.
That's a huge dark show. Get ready for that show, folks. So, but let's move on to plants, because that actually is a good segue, because Kyle brought up, you know, why do we devalue life or ignore certain things about certain animals and each other? But then you get into plants, because whether plants have a soul, again, is a question. A lot of people would say no. If you talk about it like energy and consciousness that isn't necessarily mainstream, then yeah, then plants do have a soul. Kyle, do you think plants have a soul?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, I'm getting away from my biffism. You know, plant sits there in the ground, idiot. You know, just waiting for somebody to step on it or pick it or piss on it, idiot. No, for sure, man. I mean, especially if you view it through the light of energy having some sort of correlation or energy equals soul. You know, if you want to sort of take it to that simple scientific place, where, you know, if you have a certain amount of energy or some definable life force that is some people would define soul that way, then definitely. I mean, I think it's a little bit more than that, and I'm actually willing to say that plants have souls too. You know, it's hard. I don't really know why I'm saying that, but I'm saying.
So many people say no. There are so many people that instantly go, no, of course plants don't have a soul. Why would plants have a soul? You know, so many people would instantly say no without really even thinking about it. So it's a tough question, because is a blade, then if you are, you know, we both can agree that, yeah, plants can have a soul, or say yes, 100% yes. But then is a blade of grass have a different soul than a giant tree? You know, a 1,000-year-old tree obviously has this amazing energy. Does a blade of grass have that same energy?
I don't know, but whoever these people are, they never have seen Avatar, and that's a real problem. Okay, that's a serious issue.
Avatar? What's Avatar?
I'm joking, but no, that's a good question, because one of the places where somebody who was sort of lined up with, you know, your thinking and my thinking would say, okay, you know, there's a tree, I think I just read about it. It's in like California. It's maybe in Joshua Tree. It's like 4,500 years old.
Right. So, I think that's one of the oldest trees on the planet.
Yeah, like I don't know what the definition of soul is. We read it from the dictionary, and we found it on Wiki and all these other stuff. But I'd like to think that after 4,500 years, that tree has something that nothing else has. Maybe Absolutely. It doesn't. Maybe it's just a matter of chemicals that move up and down through its little trunk, through the xylem.
But that's all we are. We're chemicals that move through our veins.
That's a good point. That's very true. So yeah, I mean, is there a difference between a blade of grass and the 4,500-year-old tree? Sure. Yeah, I will say there is. Does one have a soul and the other one doesn't? I'm not really sure if I can answer that question.
Well, because I bring up the blade of grass because I have a lawn. You have a lawn, right?
Oh yeah, I got a nice lawn.
Okay, well,
you mow good care of my lawn.
You mow your lawn. I mow my lawn. So these this little grass is trying to grow, and we fucking chop it in half every once in a while.
I know, but my grass is happy, and half my lawn is turned back to moss anyway.
But so
Very
what
soulful. There's a lot of soul in moss.
So what I'm saying is that there is a, you can't just say philosophically, oh yeah, every plant has a soul. Well, we chop grass in half, and if you eat less animal products, we eat a lot of plants, so we chomp it down, and we consume them. So I'm just saying, like, plants can't have the same rights as animals, even though it'd be nice philosophically to think about that. They just can't in the way that we deal with plants as humans. Like, if a grass can't have the same rights because I chop it in half every once in a while.
That's funny. Yeah, no, you're right. I wonder if there's any weight to the idea of collective soul.
We're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that.
Oh, okay. Because so that's where my mind is going with the blade of grass. So maybe the blade of grass has less soul than its 45-year-old cousin in Yucca Mountain or whatever. Right? But still, that blade of grass with all its little grassy blade brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and aunts, maybe collectively
they amount to something.
Soul. And maybe even, it's not like, oh, Kyle's yard just talked to someone's yard and they're talking because they both have collective souls, so much as like almost like similar to a mycelial carpet. You know what I mean? There's some sort of interconnectivity. You know what I mean? Because why does soul, like, our concept of it, have to fit just into this one simple mold? I mean, clearly it's not simple, and clearly there's not one of them. But a lot of times people are like, well, my idea of the soul is this, and your idea of the soul is that. Clearly this is my idea, and this is right, and yours is wrong. Meaning a lot of this gets tied into religion, which is what I hate. But then again, there has to be something outside of science to explain some of these things. Or I feel like maybe there is something that science doesn't necessarily explain, and it does have to do with souls and consciousness and spirituality. There's not much science really there that I've been able to discover. I haven't been looking that much, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just there's things that are there that aren't simply explicable by talking about chemical makeup and electrons firing. You know what I mean? There's something. Absolutely. There's something deeper.
Possibly an implicit reality that we're not aware of completely.
quite possibly an implicit reality that we're not aware of.
Which I talk about every fucking week. Should
I talk about that IKEA experiment though with the plants and the bullying?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good point. Talk about that.
And I mean, we could use this either as a way, another question really is what it is. Now, obviously, some people that our vast body of listeners might know this story as something that they had seen in the news not too long ago. And admittedly, this is not a 100% scientific experiment, although there were elements of control in the experiment. But basically, the nuts and bolts of it was in South Africa, I think.
South Africa. What?
South Africa.
Oh, South Africa.
South Africa. Yeah.
South Africa.
I think it was in South Africa.
South Africa.
They put. No, it wasn't. It was in the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
They had a school, and they put two, like, I don't know, they look like ficus plants, not too far away from each other. So, and the plants got the same light and the same water and the same air. And the students were instructed to walk by on the daily and verbally bully one plant and praise the other plant. And at the end of a 30-day period, there were very clear differences in the way the plants grew. The plant that was bullied was droopy and quite obviously unhappy. And the plant that was buoyed, by praise and compliments, was quite a bit more robust. Again, like I said, the founders of the experiment admitted it wasn't fully scientific and there are little holes in it, but I thought that was a very interesting and telling exhibit. And it goes along with the idea. I mean, there's gardeners, there's age-old gardeners' wisdom that say that you should throw positive energy into your plants. And that talking to them, talking to yourself, and talking to your plants at the same time on a sunny day will actually pay you dividends. And I've actually never tried that, because most of the time when I'm gardening, I'm like, oh, fuck my back. Oh, the fucking sun. It's so hot, or like, ow, the stinging insects, But, it's something that I think is worth, like, trying to be open-minded about, you know what I mean? And thinking that maybe there's these sort of sedentary beings that just sit there and grow, and they seem like they don't have anything to them aside from green and root and dirt. But maybe there is actually something that something more, Um,
Absolutely. So that's a good segue. So let's talk about something more. But before we do, I think that I think that there's absolutely a soul in almost every living thing, whether that's a human or an animal or a plant. And I think they deserve more respect. We can't necessarily treat them perfectly. We can't necessarily uh, be completely idealistic in everything we want to do with our surroundings on the planet, because as humans, as we talked about, we're weird, shitty people sometimes. But all those things deserve more respect. They deserve more understanding of living creatures. And so it's kind of like, oh, it's some hippie shit, like, oh, living creatures and stuff. But we're all living creatures, and if we don't put forth that respect and that attempt to understand, I think we're doing a disservice to our own humanity, to our communities. So try and give all these things more respect, as your community around you. It's not just a human community, it's an animal community and a plant community as well.
it's a system.
It's a system. Yeah, exactly. We're all part of this system. So on a broader sense, I think that really is related to not just the planet, but the entire universe. So I want to talk about some nerdy shit. I want to move on to a slightly different topic with some nerdy shit for a second, but then I'm going to tie it around. So I've been thinking a lot lately about the expansion of the universe, because I was reading some new data about it. So I don't know if Kyle, or the folks at home, if you're aware that our universe is expanding exponentially. So
I've heard that before.
So the theory that the Big Bang happened, there's the Big Bang, and then things expand, and then like many, like when the Big Bang theory first came about, and for a long time, many years, they thought it was going to expand and then contract, or they thought the expansion was going to slow down. But the data proved otherwise. The observable universe shows that the universe not only is continuing to expand, but it's expanding faster. It's speeding up. In fact, they think that the space, a lot of space in the universe expands faster than the speed of light. So they say, travel at the speed of light isn't possible in space, but it's possible outside of space, because space itself is traveling at the speed of light in its expansion rate. It's really crazy to think about how space around us can be expanding faster than the speed of light. Like, it's kind of boggles the mind. And then you have these theories with dark matter and dark energy, which basically say certain processes like that in the universe have to be explained. And one way to explain them is there's this mysterious energy that takes up 70% of the universe that we don't really know what it is, but it's the reason why there's expansion. What's that, Kyle?
Dark matter.
And then dark matter. And then dark matter is like a smaller percentage that there's a...
Oh, I thought that was dark matter.
So they say they're two different things. One's dark energy and one's dark matter, and they have different processes that they basically, scientists use them to explain things they can't explain. They're like, we don't know why this is happening. It's dark matter, it's dark energy. And it's an interesting theory, but there's no evidence. There's actually people that sit in these little rooms looking for particles of dark matter and dark energy. And it's like, what do you think you're going to find here, buddy? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So
they get paid?
Yeah, they do. They get grants. They get grants from universities. They get grants from universities to find a particle of dark energy. And it's because mainstream science, it puts forth these theories, and they try and find proof of it. And I think
They're watching Facebook.
Well, but I think they're barking up the wrong tree, because in my opinion, it has to do with an implicit and an explicit reality. So I talk about the holographic theory, and in the holographic theory, you have our explicit reality of what we see in the observable universe, and you have an implicit reality that we aren't really quite aware of. So to me, it fits perfectly with this theory, because you have an expansion that's moving faster than it keeps speeding up. We don't know why. You have these processes on the universal energy and matter that we don't know why those processes, or where the movement and where the gravity comes from. So we say dark energy and matter. To me, it's just an implicit reality. To me, it's just a reality that we don't know, we're not aware of. So I'm not telling you I know what it is. I'm not saying I can explain it exactly what it is. I'm just saying that these processes are just in a reality that we're unaware of, and we're not going to be able to explain them easily. Now, as a universal whole, when I think about the expansion of the universe, I actually think about the nature of the soul. I know it's a jump, it's a strange stretch, but the reason that it's connected is because as the universe is expanding, and as there are these processes in the implicit reality that we're not aware of, that implicit reality is something. It exists, and it may not necessarily have a specific purpose, but it's almost a consciousness. And our universe is almost a consciousness, and our galaxy is a consciousness, and our solar system is a consciousness, and our planet is a consciousness, and humans and plants and animals. So in my opinion, in my humble opinion, because it is just an opinion, I could be completely full of shit, but in my thoughtful opinion that I've been thinking about a lot, the entire universe is one soul. So in this life, in this universe, in this thing that we call existence, I think that we're a giant soul. I think we're a giant life form. We're a creation. And I don't think it's a God that created us. I don't know from the outside what created us, but I think we're a soul. I think that we have consciousness, and we have spirituality, and we have we have energy. We have all that stuff that we said defines a soul. It's all there in the universe. So I don't limit it. So when earlier in the show I said, "Oh, I have some more to talk about," because I don't limit it. I don't limit it to myself. I don't limit it to an animal. I don't limit it to a plant. I not only want it to be the whole planet, I want it to be the whole galaxy and the whole universe. So I personally think that, do plants and animals have souls? Of course, because the entire universe has a soul. The entire existence of our reality is soulful. It is a soul. We're all connected. And if you look at so many theories of physics, whether it's down to the microscopic level, or down to the atomic level, or smaller, down to the Planck length level, all those levels, we're all connected. Every single level shows how we're connected. It's all right in front of us. It's all there. The information is constantly beating us on the head. You're connected, dummy. You're connected, dummy. You're connected, dummy. So let's just put two and two together and say, yeah, we're connected. We're all part of this one soul. So we tend to think like we're so separate from each other and we're so different, but we're the same. We're all the same soul. We just have this weird ego that thinks we're special or we're individual, and that's bullshit in my opinion. We're all a soul. We're all this one universe. And maybe if we start thinking a little bit more like that, we'd be a little bit more compassionate and not such psychos to each other. Okay, that's the end of my rant. Kyle.
I don't know what to say to that other than that, I'm going to just take Donald Trump's America First policy and say Earth first, man. I ain't got no room for sharing my soul with the galaxy or the universe or I think you're quarking up the wrong tree. No, I'm kind of having a little fun at your expense. I like the theory. I can't speak to it. I certainly can take something away from it though, something positive, which is that, and this goes back to something we were talking about before, doesn't matter on which level you're looking at it, a small, a medium, or a grand level, we are part of a system is one of the underlying themes of your sort, that one of the, I think, is one of the underlying themes of what you were saying. Accept it. We are connected. We are part of a system. And that can be, I like that because that is applicable at any scale, whether it's from the very smallest to the very largest. That is applicable. And that is something that you can strive for in your everyday life, is to say, okay, well, I'm part of this system. How am I going to try and maybe make it better or be better? You know what I mean? Channeling my Melania Trump right now. Be better, you know? No, the being part of a system is a huge thing that's missing. And I think that there is, it sounds almost flippant, you know, it sounds like a last minute connection. There's something very soulful
Oh, Kyle just froze
about
up for a second.
being connected with the next person or being that you're dealing with, or walking across the yard and feeling a certain level of connection with the plants, whether it was an old tree or a blade of grass. You know, it's like there's a cognitive thing there that we really just sort of need to start, you know, basically putting more of a priority on, more of an emphasis on.
Yeah,
So,
totally. Like almost like you said, we're connected, you know, with your fellow human or plant or animal or whatever. It's like an intuition, right? You have this like feeling that you're connected, and it's hard sometimes to get past the ego and to do things about it, or to really like act on it. But it's there. Those feelings, those intuitive feelings are there. I think every human has them, and
I
so
keep
that
on.
actually, what's that?
Go ahead. No, finish. Sorry.
No, I was done. I was just saying that's going to bring me to my next point.
I keep on coming back to this idea of like, and this isn't really the point of the whole thing. We were trying to put a definition on soul and what does it mean and who has it, what it is, blah, blah, blah. But I think that, you know, in a quest towards a more soulful existence, I keep on coming back to this idea of trying to be more empathetic
Right.
to the other, whether it's another person or a blade of grass or a small little furtive creature furrowing in the dirt. You know, it's like if people had more of an idea or more of a consciousness that was connected to the other, I feel like we would actually have, even if it was not more scientifically definable, there might be more people walking on the earth that would feel soulful. You know what I mean? They would have those sort of like the alternate descriptions of, you know, having their soul touched on a regular basis, or having a deeper soulful connection to your surroundings. And I think that sort of, I keep on coming back to this idea of just being more empathetic to other living creatures, really.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of put into different words kind of what I was saying, and you put it into a perspective, you know, your perspective. My perspective is a little bit more out there, like universal craziness, but your perspective is more grounded. And so I appreciate that perspective. So, a little trick, I just want to share a little trick I do sometimes when I meditate, or sometimes when I try and be one, or try and connect and be more empathetic. So sometimes there's a technique in meditation where you have a mantra, or you say certain things, or think certain things. And one of those can be, I am one with the universe. That's a common one, right? I'm one with the universe. I'm one with my surroundings. I'm one with this. I am one with the ocean. I am one with the universe. I am one. But in the past, I discovered something about, for my own personal attempt at it, is that for me, saying I am one wasn't really doing it. It was more, I am the universe. I am the ocean. I am the plant. I am the animal. So even saying I am one with is almost a separation. So I think that we need to get, for me, again, you know, you put it into more grounded words. For me, it's like my head's in the universe. I am the universe.
But that makes a lot of sense, though. And I think that there's a lot of people that will glom onto that, because when semantics play an important role in the way that we think about things, attack problems, look at certain problems or certain ideas, and just the simple removal of that word, I am one with the universe versus I am the universe, two words, I guess, one with, and that they're saying the same thing, but people's minds might grok on those two things differently. There's those two little words, they put a little speed bump in there for some people.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It did for me.
And I
It
think
did
that
for me.
I think that is a valuable point, man. That's a very valuable point.
So that we're running out of time, so that's going to bring us to the end of the show. Our favorite part of the show, which is 80s movies wisdom. Boom, 80s movies wisdom. So I like to tie things together, and so this week I had an epiphany about 80s movies wisdom because Kyle and I love 80s movies. We love all good movies, but 80s movies have a special place in our hearts. We grew up in the 80s. We love 80s shit. So there's an 80s movies, Ghostbusters. Kyle said he knows every line. I know so much of that movie. It's such a iconic, awesome movie. So there's this one part towards the end of the movie where the Ghostbusters they're in Dana Barrett's building. They're in her apartment and they're about to go in the final battle against Gozer the Gozerian, right? So there's like an explosion and there's some shit happens and goes down, and then they have to go up to the building, or they have to go up to the next floor. And one of the Ghostbusters, I think it's Spangler, says,
No, it was
no?
it was Ray. I thought it was Ray.
I'm not sure. Okay,
Dan
Ray.
Aykroyd's character.
Dan Aykroyd's character.
Where do these stairs go?
And Peter Venkman's character says, they go up. And that's it. That's the wisdom. And that's wisdom because he doesn't overthink it. And that's one of the problems with the society, with how we deal with plants and animals and the soul, is we overthink it. We sit there and we go around in these circles and we don't use our intuition. We don't realize when we go outside that, yeah, we're connected to the person next to us. We're connected with this animal. We're connected with this plant. You know it inside. You have that feeling. We all have that intuition that we're connected, that we feel certain things, but then we overthink it. We sit there and we overanalyze and we give excuses and blah, blah, frickin' blah. And then we end up with all sorts of bullshit. But the reality is that you can't overthink things. Where do these stairs go? They go up. What's the soul? It's all around us. Where's, do these plants and animals deserve more respect? Yep. Don't overthink it. Do your best. Don't over fucking think things.
And you know what? That's part of why I think that there's a lot of people out there that have a real backlash about memes. You know what I mean? Because memes can be really shitty and stupid, really stupid. But I've seen some other ones that are amazingly thoughtful and wonderful, and they almost could be turned from a meme into a mantra. And actually, in fact, they are. A lot of them are age-old wisdom. Where do these stairs go? They go up. I'm going through my daily life, something I should think about all the time, and this is me and everybody else. You go to do something. It's not a meme. It has been a meme, but it was something before it was a meme. It was, think about it. Is it kind? Is it simple? It's just like, it's a thing where it's like, there's 3 very simple rules, and basically what they say is your action going to hurt somebody? Is your action going to result in something, negative? Or it's like if everybody could just sort of adhere to that, and you can't do it every day all the time because of the system we live in. But again, like you said, don't overthink it. That's where those simple mantras come into play, and I think there's value in that, but it takes a certain level of discipline to really live by the rules.
It does. It's interesting how it takes discipline to not overthink things.
Sorry, my dog. Sorry.
It's okay. Right. Dogs can bark. He can be a dog, but that's let him bark. It's no big deal unless he's right. Gonna attack something. But I'm just saying, that's the future show when we talk about how messed up humans are. It takes discipline for us to just relax. It takes discipline to not overthink things. I mean, what kind of weird creature are we that's where we've gotten to?
I know.
Yeah.
It's sad, and it's a real challenge on society. I mean, the pecking order is alive and well, and that's right in there with another either the same show. You know, why do we still adhere to these ancient rules, and why is it's so anti-soulful?
So weird.
I mean, we can keep going, but we're not going to.
Yeah, that's a dark show coming up, folks. But let's put that aside because we had a good show. We talked about the soul, and I think we came to a good agreement how it exists all around us. Some people might not agree it's everywhere, but it certainly is in all your fellow living creatures around you. So don't overthink things. Be connected to your fellow creatures, and don't do crazy shit.
And go watch Avatar. Because the movie's awesome, and it talks a lot about soulful shit.
I agree. It's a good movie. It's a good one. And Ghostbusters too, because it's just a kick-ass movie.
Yeah, but Avatar.
All right. Well, we appreciate our listeners. Thanks for joining us today. Kyle, thank you for joining me and being here.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
This was the Holographic Podcast, signing off.